I'm not even sure where to begin with this. I guess I should just start by saying that my wife, Laura, and I had been married for 6 years, no kids, just us. Things had been okay, I guess. At least, that's what I thought. A few months ago, Laura started taking taxis to work. At first, it didn't bother me. I mean, we live in a city where public transportation can be unreliable, and she said it was more convenient. But it wasn't just any taxi. It was always the same guy. His name was Mark, and she talked about him constantly. "Oh, Mark said this," or "Mark gave me advice on that." Honestly, I didn't think much of it. He was just her driver, right? But looking back now, I should have seen the signs. The way she started dressing differently, always in a rush to leave the house. She was glued to her phone more than usual, and when I asked her about it, she just brushed me off, saying, "Oh, it's work stuff." Or, "I'm texting a friend." She had this way of making me feel like I was paranoid for even asking. Then came the late night work dinners. She'd tell me they were mandatory, that her boss needed her to stay late. I'd ask why she was coming home in a taxi every time, and she'd snap at me, saying it was safer at night. She always had an excuse, and I always wanted to believe her. It wasn't until much later that things started to feel off. I began to notice how eager she was for these rides. It was almost as if she looked forward to them more than anything else in her day. But I didn't say anything. Why would I? I trusted her. The days turned into weeks, and I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in the back of my mind. I just kept convincing myself that I was being ridiculous. After all, Laura had always been the more social one, and I didn't want to be that husband who freaked out over nothing. Then, one fateful Friday night, I decided to surprise Laura. I got off work early and picked up a bottle of her favorite wine, planning to create a cozy evening. I came home, set the table, and waited for her. But as the clock ticked closer to 8, I started to feel anxious. She wasn't answering her phone. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. I told myself it was probably another work dinner or traffic. But deep down, I felt that familiar knot tightening in my stomach. After a couple of hours, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to go out and find her. It was late, but I grabbed my jacket and headed toward her office, half hoping I'd catch her wrapping up a long meeting. As I walked to the parking lot, I noticed a taxi pulling up in front of a small cafe just a block away from her office. I squinted, and there was Laura getting out. I felt a rush of relief, until I saw Mark getting out right after her. My heart dropped. I ducked behind a nearby car, trying to catch my breath. They were laughing, leaning in close, and whispering to each other like old friends. Something in my gut screamed that this was more than just friendship. It was the way she looked at him, with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen in ages. Then, to my utter disbelief, they slipped into the back seat of the taxi together. The world around me faded as I felt the blood rush from my head. I wanted to confront them, but I was frozen in place, the weight of what I was witnessing holding me back. Suddenly, the taxi's windows fogged up, and I caught a glimpse of movement inside. I couldn't see everything, but when I saw Laura lean over and then the unmistakable sight of them, together, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I fought to process the image before me. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Laura. "Sorry! Work's taking longer than expected. Be home soon." I almost laughed. How could she be so clueless? Or was she? My heart was racing, anger coursing through my veins. I took a step back, nearly stumbling as I turned to walk away, needing to think. I could feel the world crashing down around me. This wasn't just a momentary lapse or a fling. This was betrayal at its most basic level. And that was just the beginning of the storm that was about to unravel. I walked home in a daze, each step feeling heavier than the last. The image of Laura and Mark was burned into my mind, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. How long had this been going on? Did she ever love me, or was I just a placeholder in her life? I paced around our apartment, the bottle of wine I had bought now feeling like a cruel joke. The warm, inviting atmosphere I had imagined for our evening was replaced with cold anger. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. She still hadn't come home. When the door finally creaked open, I turned to face her, my heart pounding. Laura stepped in, looking flustered but trying to play it cool. "Hey, babe! Sorry I'm so late. You know how work is," she said, her voice upbeat but with an edge of nervousness that didn't escape me. "Yeah, I saw," I replied, my tone sharp. "I saw you with Mark." Her smile faltered, and for a moment, her eyes flashed with panic. But she quickly recovered, flipping her hair back and dismissing me with a laugh. "You must have seen us getting out of the taxi. We were just talking about work stuff." "Right," I scoffed, crossing my arms. "Talking, huh? Because it looked more like you were having a great time together." Her expression shifted from confidence to irritation, and she snapped back. "What do you want me to say? You're being ridiculous. Mark is just a friend. He helps me with work things. Friends don't cuddle and whisper sweet nothings in the back seat of a taxi, Laura." I raised my voice, feeling my anger boil over. "You think I'm an idiot? I saw everything." She let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes. "Oh, come on. You're blowing this out of proportion. I can't even have a conversation with someone without you jumping to conclusions. You need to trust me." "Trust?" I shouted, incredulous. "You've shattered any trust one had. How long has this been going on? Because I saw you two together like that, and it wasn't just a friendly chat." Laura's face contorted with frustration. "You're being such a jerk. Maybe if you actually paid attention to me instead of always working, we wouldn't be in this position." Her words felt like a slap, and I took a step back, trying to process the audacity of her deflection. "So this is my fault now?" I shook my head in disbelief. "I can't even wrap my head around how you can sit here and act like this is somehow justified." She crossed her arms, her expression shifting to a defensive posture. "What do you want me to do? Just admit I've been having a thing with Mark? I'm not going to grovel for your forgiveness when you don't even trust me." In that moment, I felt a cold wave of clarity wash over me. This wasn't just a fight, it was the end of something I had held dear. "You know what? Maybe I should file for divorce," I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. Laura gasped, her eyes widening in shock. "You're serious? You think you can just throw away our entire life together because of some wild imagination?" "No," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm throwing it away because of your actions. This isn't a wild imagination, it's reality. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." As I turned away, her screams followed me, a mix of anger and desperation. But I was done. I was tired of her lies and her manipulations. I knew I needed to take control of my life, and that meant letting go of the woman I thought I knew. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I had made the decision to file for divorce, but the reality of it felt like a punch to the gut. I went through the motions of work and life, but every time I saw Laura, my blood boiled. She was still trying to play the victim, claiming I was overreacting, but I could see right through her facade. I decided to take a few days off work to clear my head and figure out my next steps. During this time, I started collecting evidence, texts, receipts, anything I could use. I scoured through her phone when she left it lying around and stumbled upon conversations between her and Mark that made my stomach turn. They were flirty, full of inside jokes and heart emojis, and it was sickening to see the intimacy they shared. One evening, while I was deep in thought, Laura came home early. I could tell she was on edge, and my heart raced as she approached me. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to talk about? Your friendship with Mark?" She hesitated for a moment, then began to pace the room. "Okay, maybe I wasn't entirely truthful. But I didn't think it was that serious. We were just having fun." "Fun?" I echoed incredulously. "You think betraying your husband is fun? You think sneaking around is a game?" Laura's demeanor shifted again, and I could see the frantic wheels turning in her head. It didn't mean anything. I love you. You have to believe me. But I was done with her lies. You've said that so many times, but your actions scream otherwise. You betrayed my trust, and now you expect me to just forget it? Suddenly she lunged toward me, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. You don't understand. I was unhappy. You're always so busy with work, and I felt lonely. Mark was there for me. Her words cut deep, and I felt my anger morph into something colder. So you chose to cheat instead of talking to me? You couldn't come to me with your problems? You just jumped into bed with someone else? She paused, her eyes wild. You don't get it. You don't know how it feels to be neglected. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Neglect? You're deflecting. You made choices that hurt me, and now you want to blame me for them? I refuse to play this game anymore, Laura. She shook her head in disbelief. You're throwing everything away for a mistake. I made a mistake. A mistake? You call this a mistake? I countered, my voice low and steady. This was a choice. You chose to cheat on me, and now you want to act like it's all my fault? The room was thick with tension, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but I was resolute. I'm done, Laura. I'm moving forward with the divorce. You can't keep manipulating me into feeling guilty for your actions. As I turned away, I could hear her voice rising again, desperate and frantic. You can't do this. You can't just throw away our marriage because of one mistake. You're being unreasonable. But I didn't turn back. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I walked away from the chaos she created. I was finally taking control of my life, and it was a relief to know I was no longer living in the shadow of her betrayal. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The storm was far from over. The next few days were a blur. I consulted with a lawyer to start the divorce process, but every meeting felt surreal. I was suddenly thrust into a world I had never anticipated: papers, legal jargon, and the reality of breaking apart a life I had built with Laura. Meanwhile, Laura ramped up her attempts to win me back. She sent me text after text, begging for forgiveness. I'll change, I swear. Just give me another chance, she pleaded. I didn't respond. I knew any reply would only encourage her to keep pushing. One evening, I came home from my lawyer's office to find her sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her face. Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes, she begged. I know I messed up, but I can't lose you like this. I crossed my arms, trying to shield myself from the emotional onslaught. Laura, we've talked about this. You broke my trust. I can't just forget that. She got up and grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. You don't understand. I feel so lost without you. You mean everything to me. I looked into her eyes, searching for any trace of sincerity. If I meant everything to you, you wouldn't have cheated on me, I said, my voice steady. This isn't about losing me, it's about you losing your safety net. I'm not here to fulfill that for you anymore. Her face twisted in anger and despair. You think you're better than me? You're acting like you've never made a mistake in your life. No, I'm acting like an adult who takes responsibility for his actions. You need to do the same, I replied coldly, feeling my patience wearing thin. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard her crying softly in the other room. My heart ached for a moment, but I reminded myself of the betrayal that had pushed us to this point. I couldn't let guilt sway me. The following week, I received an unexpected call from Mark. It turned out Laura had shared her troubles with him, and he wanted to discuss things. I was torn between anger and curiosity, but I decided to hear him out. Maybe I could get some answers from the man who had turned my life upside down. We met at a coffee shop, and he looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting to see Laura lurking in the shadows. I didn't want it to come to this, he said, his voice shaky. I never meant to hurt you. Yet you did, I shot back. You knew she was married, and you still pursued her. How do you justify that? Mark shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. Honestly? I didn't think it was serious. She always talked about her husband like he was distant. I thought she was unhappy, and I was just there for her. Just there for her. I laughed bitterly. You were more than just there, Mark. You were a part of a choice she made, a choice that destroyed my marriage. He looked down, guilt etched on his face. I know, and I'm sorry. I was caught up in it too. I didn't think it would go this far. I care about her, but I never wanted to hurt you. Caring about her is what got me here, I replied, my tone steely. You think this is some kind of game? You've ruined everything I built with her, and you have the audacity to sit here and apologize? He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. Save it. You're not the one who gets to decide how this ends. I'm filing for divorce, and it's going to happen whether you like it or not. Mark nodded, his expression resigned. I get it. Just be kind to her. She's not a bad person, she made a mistake. I clenched my jaw, trying to suppress the surge of anger. She made a choice, Mark. That's what I can't forget. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a mixture of rage and clarity. The next steps were going to be tough, but I was determined to move on from this mess. Laura's actions had shown me the depths of betrayal, but they had also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to let her manipulations drag me down any longer. But I knew the hardest part was yet to come, facing her with my decision to move forward, and the inevitable fallout that would follow. The day I planned to confront Laura about my decision was etched in my mind. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I was bracing myself for the chaos that would undoubtedly ensue. I could feel the tension crackling in the air as I returned home from work that evening, knowing that I was about to shatter any hope she had left of salvaging our marriage. As soon as I walked in, I noticed the atmosphere was different. The apartment was unusually quiet. Laura was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy, as if she'd been crying all day. It felt like she knew what was coming. Hey, she said softly, her voice trembling. I've been thinking, maybe we can talk things through, really this time. I want to fix this. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to be firm. Laura, we need to talk about the divorce. Her expression shifted from hope to disbelief. You're serious? After everything I've said? I thought we were working on this together. I can't work on a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I've made my decision, I replied, my voice steady. She shot up from the couch, her face turning crimson with anger. You can't just throw everything away because of one mistake. You're being unreasonable. It's not just one mistake. It's a choice you made repeatedly, and I can't trust you anymore, I said, feeling the anger bubbling up within me. Trust? What about the trust one had to have in you when you ignored me for work? You were never around. You think I wanted to go to Mark? She yelled, her hysteria rising. I felt alone, and he was there. You have no idea how much I needed you. Instead of talking to me about it, you chose to betray me. I shot back, frustration boiling over. You could have come to me, but instead, you decided to sneak around. You're trying to twist this into something it's not. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. I was desperate. I thought you'd never notice. I never meant to hurt you. The sheer volume of her denial was infuriating. And what about my feelings, Laura? You don't get to play the victim here. You hurt me. You broke my trust. This isn't about you being unhappy. This is about the choices you made. She took a step toward me, her voice dropping to a whisper. I can change. I swear. I'll do anything. Just please don't leave me. I felt a flicker of empathy, but it quickly vanished. You've already made your choice, Laura. I've already filed the papers. It's only a matter of time now. Her face contorted with desperation. You filed? You went behind my back and did that? I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. I had to protect myself. I can't be in this situation anymore. She fell silent, her body trembling with rage and sadness. You're throwing away everything for a mistake I made. You'll regret this. You'll see. I don't think so, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I've spent too long feeling like I was living in a lie. I'm ready to move on. As I turned to leave the room, I heard her voice rise again, filled with anger. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. You'll be sorry when you realize how good we had it. I closed the door behind me, the sound echoing in the silence that followed. As much as her words stung, I knew I was doing the right thing. The weight of our marriage felt lifted, and although the road ahead was uncertain, I was finally reclaiming my life. But deep down, I knew that this was just the calm before the storm. Laura wouldn't let go without a fight, and I was prepared for the battles to come. The divorce was just the beginning, and I had no idea how messy it was about to get. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and mounting tension. I had anticipated the process would be challenging, but I hadn't prepared for the emotional warfare that Laura would unleash. Every time I returned home, she was there, a whirlwind of tears, accusations, and desperate pleas for reconciliation. One night, as I sat at the dining table sorting through divorce papers, she stormed in, eyes wild and hair disheveled. You're being so cold-hearted. You're just going to let me go without a fight? She shouted. I'm not the one who betrayed our vows, Laura, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. You're the one who needs to take responsibility for your actions. She crossed her arms defiantly, her expression shifting from anger to desperation. I made a mistake, yes. But you're acting like it's the end of the world. We can work through this if you just give me a chance. Work through what? Your affair? Your lies? This isn't something we can just brush under the rug, I said, frustration bubbling in my chest. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're going to regret this. You think I'm the only one who messed up? You've always prioritized work over me. You never made time for us. That familiar guilt surged again, but I fought it back. I was working for us, for our future. I didn't sign up for this kind of betrayal. It's not about regret, it's about what's right for both of us. And right now, this marriage isn't right for me. Laura let out a strangled cry, a mix of anger and hurt. You don't get to just walk away. You'll miss me. You'll be lonely. Lonely? I scoffed. I was lonely when I was with you. This is a toxic cycle, and I refuse to let it continue. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability that tugged at my heart. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by anger. You think you can just throw me away? I'll make sure you regret this. You'll be the one who's lonely. Do what you want, I said, my patience waning. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being trapped in a marriage with someone who doesn't respect me. As I turned to leave the room, I could hear her voice rise again, full of venom. You think you're better than me? You think this is easy for me? You're delusional. You'll never find someone like me again. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was doing the right thing. I needed to keep my distance. I started staying late at work and spending more time with friends, seeking solace in their support. But every time I walked through the door, Laura was there, an emotional minefield. Then came the bombshell. One evening, I received a text from Mark. It was unexpected and sent my heart racing. Can we talk? I need to clear the air. I think you deserve to know some things. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. We arranged to meet at the same coffee shop where we had spoken before. As I walked in, I found him already seated, looking nervous. Thanks for coming, he said, his voice low. I know this is complicated, but I felt it was important to reach out. I care about Laura, but I never wanted to hurt you. I crossed my arms, my skepticism evident. You say that, but your actions say otherwise. What's this really about? He took a deep breath, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. I didn't know the extent of her feelings for you until recently. She's been telling me things that made me question what we had. And now I think she's realizing she messed up. I just wanted you to know that. I felt a mix of anger and confusion. So you're saying she's regretting her choices now? That doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change what happened. I know, but I also think she's scared, he said, looking down. She's been talking about how she feels trapped, and I thought you should know. She seems to think you're better off without her, but that's not what I believe. Why should I care what she thinks now? She made her bed, I replied, feeling my frustration boiling over. This isn't about sympathy for her anymore. It's about what's right for me. Mark nodded, looking remorseful. You're right. I just thought maybe if you understood her better, it could help you both find closure. I shook my head, pushing my chair back. Closure? What does that even mean now? I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for a way to move on. Laura made her choices, and I'm done being the one left to clean up the mess. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. I had come to terms with my feelings, and while I was grateful for the clarity, I knew that Laura wouldn't give up without a fight. I was ready for whatever came next, but the weight of it all still felt heavy on my shoulders. Little did I know, the real confrontation was still ahead, and it would shake the very foundations of what I thought I knew about our relationship. The following week was like walking through a minefield. I was emotionally drained, and I could feel the tension in the air every time I walked through the front door. Laura was relentless in her attempts to convince me to reconsider. She would leave notes around the apartment, each one more desperate than the last. Please don't throw away our love, one read. Another simply said, I miss you. But I had made my decision, and I was sticking to it. Then came the evening that changed everything. I had just finished dinner when my phone buzzed with a message from Laura. Can we talk? I need to explain everything. My gut instinct screamed that this was going to be another emotional showdown, but I didn't want to leave things unresolved. I agreed to meet her in the living room. When I entered, I found her sitting on the couch, a mixture of anger and despair etched across her face. You need to hear me out, seriously, she said, her voice trembling. Go ahead, I replied, crossing my arms. But make it quick. I don't want to drag this out any longer. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I've been thinking about everything. I realize how much I hurt you, and it wasn't just a mistake. I was confused and unhappy, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I felt my heart harden. You've said this before, Laura. Your apologies don't change the fact that you cheated. You can't keep expecting me to just forgive and forget because you feel guilty now. Please, just listen, she cried, her voice rising. I was feeling so lonely. I thought you didn't care about me, and I got swept up in the moment. Mark was there, and I let myself believe I could be happy again. But then I realized, I don't want him, I want you. Wanting me now doesn't erase what you did, I said, my voice steady. You had your chance, and you threw it away for someone who was just a temporary fix. Her face twisted in rage. You're being so heartless. You think you're perfect? You've made me feel like I wasn't enough for you. You never had time for me. Don't turn this around on me, I snapped. I've worked hard to provide for us, and you decided to betray that trust. You can't blame me for your choices. Just then, she paused, her expression shifting to something darker. Fine. If you want to play that game, then I'll show you what it means to be alone. I frowned, confusion washing over me. What are you talking about? I'll make this public, and I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are. You're not the victim here. I am. You think I'll just walk away quietly? I'll ruin you if that's what it takes. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. You wouldn't dare, I said, my voice a mix of anger and disbelief. Oh, but I will. You think I care about the consequences anymore? She hissed, a manic glint in her eye. I'll go to your family, your friends, anyone who will listen. You'll be the villain in this story, and I'll be the poor, betrayed wife. I felt my stomach drop. This is low, even for you. You're willing to drag both of us through the mud just to feel vindicated? That's pathetic. Pathetic? She laughed bitterly. You'll see how pathetic you really are when I'm done with you. You've underestimated me. I took a step back, realizing I was dealing with someone I barely recognized anymore. Laura, this isn't who you are. You're better than this. Don't let your anger drive you to destroy everything we built. That's not a victory, that's a loss for both of us. But she just shook her head, her eyes cold. You've made your choice, and now I'll make mine. You'll regret this. As I turned to leave, I felt the weight of dread settle heavily in my chest. This wasn't just a marriage crumbling, this was a ticking time bomb. Laura had become someone dangerous, willing to lash out and burn everything to the ground. The next day, I began preparing for the fallout. I called my lawyer to ensure I had all the necessary protections in place. I also reached out to a few close friends, letting them know what had transpired. I wanted to be proactive, to control the narrative before it spiraled out of my hands. Days passed, and Laura's threats loomed over me like a dark cloud. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. But then, one evening, as I was wrapping up work, I received a call from my mother. I just heard from Laura's friend that she's been spreading some rumors about you. You need to be careful. My blood ran cold. What kind of rumors? Things that aren't true, but enough to make you look bad. She's claiming you were neglectful and emotionally abusive, my mother said, concern heavy in her voice. Anger and disbelief flooded through me. This is insane. She's twisting everything to make me look like the villain. You need to prepare for this, son. Don't let her paint you into a corner. We believe you, but there will always be people who will side with her, she urged. I hung up, my heart racing. This was not just a breakup, it was turning into a full-blown war. I had to stay one step ahead of her, to protect myself from her vindictive nature. With every passing day, the tension escalated, and I found myself walking on eggshells. But I was determined not to let her take me down with her. I'd fight for my truth, no matter what it took. I realized that the end of our marriage wouldn't just be the closing of a chapter, it would be a battle for my future and my reputation. I had to stand firm, no matter how low Laura was willing to go. The storm was here, and I was ready to face it head on.